Okay, the second plate boundary that we need to know about is a destructive plate boundary. Now if you remember rightly, a destructive plate boundary, we've got two plates that are moving towards each other. So I'm going to label on the two arrows for the two plates that are moving towards each other. But unlike the constructive plate boundary, we've got two different types of tectonic plate. We've got an oceanic plate and we've got a continental plate. So I'm going to draw it looking a little bit like that. Okay, now if you remember, our oceanic plate is our denser plate, or heavier. So I'm going to label this one up oceanic, and I'm going to label this one up continental. Okay, so we've got our two plates that are moving towards each other. Because the oceanic plate is denser, it goes underneath the continental plate. So I could probably draw a little arrow going down like that. Okay, and we call this process subduction, because it's being subducted underneath the continental plate. Now eventually, as that goes down into the Earth's mantle, it's going to get very, very hot, and there's going to be a small area where that plate starts to melt, and we call that the subduction zone. So I'm just going to add zone on the end of that subduction. I'm just going to draw a little arrow there to show the subduction zone. Now as this plate melts, it actually forms magma, okay, and this magma rises up. Okay, so I'm going to label that there, and I'm going to put another label here that says magma rises from subduction zone, but I want you to write it out in full. And eventually that erupts in the form of a volcano. So we've got a volcano formed, and this is a particular type of volcano called a composite volcano. So I put composite volcano up there. Now unlike the conservative plate boundary, which builds up over time with the layers of ash, this does to a certain extent, but as the oceanic plate goes underneath the continental plate, we get a bit of uplift, and it's this uplift that causes this volcano or these mountains that you quite often see at a destructive plate boundary. Now because it's destructive, we get very destructive volcanoes that cause lots of damage. Also, where we get pressure building here, particularly at the subduction zone, we tend to get lots and lots of earthquakes at this particular type of plate boundary as well. One thing you also need to know is an example of a different place where this sort of plate boundary happens, and a good example could be across the coast of South America. So I'm just going to put an EG in there, and I'm going to give the example of Chile.